Before we get to the scheduling, but the small part left about the scope as far as agile projects are concerned. This is comparatively simpler than what we did with the scope in the predictive environment, because that was quite detailed. And we have talked many times so far about how the things happen in agile. So we don't need to go into a very elaborate planning as far as the scope is concerned uh, in agile, because the things are going to be incremental or iterative. And we do understand that we would be working in user stories. So these user stories are the source of forming the scope over time the project is going on, right? So it is not a static kind of a plan that this scope is of the whole project, but it is a continuously changing scope because new requirements are all the time coming into the product backlog. You might ask, then what is our starting point as far as the scope is concerned? Then you remember we do have a product roadmap. Product roadmap just gives us a starting point. It is not detailed, but it just shows us that how many releases are required in this project and what are the dates, what are to be delivered, things like that. This is sufficient information for us to start moving on to the schedule planning, to the scope planning, right? And scope planning is nothing but a continuous iteration. For every iteration, we will just start up with the selected user stories. We will bring them into progress, and ultimately we'll get them done. That is how the scope is being accomplished, right? If there is anything to be changed, it is going to be on the go, on the run, right? And remember, as we have already talked about progressive elaboration and rolling wave planning, this thing is going to be described in more detail when we are discussing the schedule. But you see, our product roadmap is like, evolving over time. One thing very important is that product roadmap is not a baseline, right? Because product roadmap is an approximate assumption how the project is going to go on. Rather, I can say it is the initial take of the customer on the whole scope. But we have a mutual understanding that we have allowed the customer to bring any changes to the scope at any time, whatever they want. So this product roadmap is highly likely to change over time. The thing where we are sure about what we are going to be doing is an iteration. As soon as we start an iteration, we have picked up certain tasks to do, certain user stories to do, and we concentrate on actually doing them. That is the implementation of a scope at the iterative level. I hope that makes some sense. Okay, as far as the release and iteration planning are concerned, as I said, if you have an idea of progressive elaboration and rolling wave planning, which we have already discussed, you would understand that when we are doing the product roadmap and the release planning, we are actually dealing with what? Progressive elaboration or rolling wave planning?
Rolling wave.
Release planning is the strategic level, is the
Oh,
top
okay.
level. So
It will be the progressive one.
Right. And when we are dealing with iteration, we are actually doing
At the tactical level, yeah.
At the technical level, and it is the
Exactly.
rolling wave planning. So at the release
Yes.
level, how many number of iterations are likely to be in the project, in the whole release? How many releases this roadmap tells us. Now, when we are doing the release planning, we say, okay, how many iterations may be there in each release? So before that, we must have decided what is the size of an iteration.
Yes.
Secondly, what are the features contained in the release? What does the release ask for? What is to be delivered? That means which are the features of the product we are to deliver during this release. So we will try to accommodate them within the iterations within that release. But that is not our mission. Our mission is to work from the bottom up. That means we will pick up the user stories which we can handle, and they will be accommodated in the first iteration. Right now in the release planning, whatever we are doing is an assumption. Right? We are not committing that we will be doing this much work in this iteration and this much work in this iteration, but that decision is left to the team. Once the team start working, they may work faster or they may work slower. Howsoever the pace is established, we will, or the product owner will discuss with the customer about the dates of the releases and about the requirements which have been added or subtracted. So that is the matter to be dealt with continuously. And due to that, after every iteration is completed, there is an opportunity given where we can go back and discuss with the customer, and the whole roadmap and its release plan may be changed. So any changes at that level is progressive elaboration. Any changes at iteration level is rolling wave planning. But I do understand people tend to use these two terminologies interchangeably, which I personally don't like. But from the, they are similar, except for the fact one is more strategic in nature and other is more tactical in nature. If you are not considering this difference, then I tend to agree that they look like the same definition. So this is as far as the planning of the scope goes. Let's dive a bit deeper into it. You remember the role of product owner. What is this guy responsible for? He is responsible for the project vision, creating the vision statement of the project, or whatever you want to call it, a charter. He is responsible for product backlog. And not only that, before that, he's also responsible for the product roadmap. He's responsible for the iteration planning, right? So all what is to be done around the product backlog, like, selecting the number of iterations and how many weeks are going to be in one iteration, things like that. These are all the decisions which are created before we start the iterations. But once we start the iterations, it is no more the responsibility of the product owner. It now becomes the responsibility of the team to do the work within an iteration, right? So you understand that this is how the things are flowing. There is a prioritized list of the known scope of work, which is the product backlog. Information is presented in form of stories, like user stories, and it is continuously updated. That is important. The scope of an agile project is continuously changing because product owner in collaboration with the team and with the instructions of the customer is continuously adding new requirements, new user stories. So you see, scope is not fixed, scope is changing. And if the scope is changing, product roadmap may also change over time. I hope you get the point. Product roadmap is going to change. Scope is going to change, that means. So it is changing all the time, continuously changing. So we don't need any change request approval. We simply decide between the product owner and the customer about the changes, and we accommodate them without any change control procedure. This is how the agile works.
What about what about the budget?
That also changes. That also changes because customer gave us a, that is approximately calculated budget for whatever they gave in the beginning. That was what is in the contract. But I would say there are agile contracts which clearly specify if there are any mutually agreed changes, the cost will change accordingly.
Okay, so on top of the product owner is responsible for the backlog. And
Yes.
if it changes, it's somebody is monitoring this, right?
Nobody is monitoring. Product owner and the customer, they are the people who are doing everything.
Yeah, but they are the two people that are monitoring the cost as well to make sure that it doesn't blow out, right?
Actually, how the cost is going to blow up, the method for that is given in the contract. It is already agreed that if new, work is added, how will it be charged?
Okay.
Rather than they debating on the cost time and again, they will follow the rule given in the contract. That's it.
Okay.
So we don't worry about the budget, right? Customer has to worry about it because if they want to add anything new, they should know that it will cost them more.
Okay.
Right. Now let us dive deeper into the user stories. As you see, our main priority for having user stories is to have them in an order of priority, right? The most highest priority item should be done first, right? And we don't want to do which are not making much of difference to the customer. So customer tells us which user story is most important to them, which is going to deliver them the highest value. And you understand, we keep our user stories in the product backlog in an order of priority, right? And as far as we understand, they should be done in the same order of priority. Now, this diagram will come later again, but right now you can see that the things are happening from top down, and these are the members of the team are, committed to doing these jobs in this order of priority. These two people from the team are actually responsible for this swim lane. Do you understand? This is one swim lane. This is another swim lane. And all the 10 people of the team would be handling, maybe, we are handling 3 or 4 user stories at a time. That means at a time, our 10 people are committed on these 3 or 4 swim lanes. Though we are giving the, doing the work in the order of priority, but there might come some work which has certain sequence in it. Please be sure that I am not talking about a critical path here. There is no critical path in Agile. As you have understood already, that in a critical path, in predictive environment, everything is happening one after the other. In an order of sequence, not in an order of priority. Here, our preference is the priority, but if there is a necessary sequence to do certain work, for example, there is a highest priority item which customer says should be done first, but to do that job, to do that user story, it has a dependency on an other user story. Until and unless that user story can be done, we cannot do this user story. So that could be connected like this. And you see, for example, these two people may be handling these two tasks, and then the remaining task may be handled by the other team when they have done this job. And that way they can move actually downwards, up from downwards, highest priority to lowest priority, right? And in various swim lanes, we are completing that job. This is how the sequencing in a user in a iteration can happen. But as I have just explained to you, it is not a hard and fast rule that all the activities will have to be connected. Only most reliant and dependent activities which are affecting our priority, we can have some connection between certain activities. And this is just a few, just the most important activity. There doesn't exist a critical path in this method. So here we are talking about the user stories, story map. This is the story map. And roadmaps I have already talked about. Roadmap provides you a big picture. Now, how does a story come into being? Naturally, we are in habit of talking about the requirement. So basically, we collect requirements from the customer. But to make it easier for the agile team, we have to convert them into doable and easily understandable statements. We want that every user story should refer to only one feature at a time. A user story should not be doing two features or more than one feature in any case. So a user story basically represents only a feature or a part of a feature, not more than that. That means the requirements collected from the customer must first be broken down into features. What are the features required to fulfill these requirements? Every requirement might be divided into a certain number of features, 1, 2, 3, right? And those features, if they are simple enough, they could be accommodated by a single user story, or they could be accommodated by, each feature could be accommodated by more than one user stories, right? And those user stories, when, for example, this feature, for example, this is feature one, which is kind of fulfilling user story 1 and 2. This is another feature which is fulfilling user story 4, 5, 3, 4, and 5. And both of these features were required to complete a requirement. That requirement will stand completed once all of these user stories have been completed. Right? So what is our main concern here is to deal with user stories. In Agile, we talk about user stories. So in a way, you could somehow compare it with the work breakdown structure, isn't it? There in Agile, in predictive, what we did was we established the requirements, then developed the product scope, then the project scope, because we were talking about the whole project or a whole product. Here we are not talking about whole product or whole project. What we have started with, we have started dividing the product, the deliverable, into features, and features into user stories. And user story is the level which is going to be completed in each iteration. I hope that makes some sense. If you understand that, we can move ahead. And then is the job of prioritizing and refining the backlog. I need not explain that, but as you see here in the previous slide, there is a concept of epic which I did not describe. What do you assume this epic means?
Basically, disorient the large stories into single features.
Actually, when you take the customer, the requirements out of customer and try and ask him that please give me each feature of your requirement, customer is not likely to do that because they would be telling you large stories that this should have this feature, and this feature. So usually what the thing customer is telling you is an epic. Epic means a long story. And a long story might be having more than one feature. But our user story should address only one feature at a time or part of a feature. Therefore, those epics which are actually addressing more than one features will have to be further subdivided into user stories. As if each user story is addressing a feature or part of a feature, but not two features.
Could you give me an example of like an epic, a feature, and a user story, please, in a industry experience?
Well, you go to the customer and ask customer, what do you want? And I advise the customer to please break it down into features and give me in form of a user story. Maybe you have given him some training or training on how a user story may look like. But customer will try to start explaining that I want this feature, the screen should look like this and it should behave like this and it should do like this and things like that. He'll try to give you a very, very long story. On even one feature, how the screen will look like, he will tell you 10 different features within that screen. Right? It should have this box and how in this it should have these characteristics. So he is giving you a very long story, which probably cannot be covered in a user story. You remember what is the format of a user story? It is a very brief format in 3 sentences, 3 parts. First part is the persona. Who is it for? Whose problem is it? And what second part is what does he or she want? And third part is as a business, what is the benefit coming out of it? Like as a businessman, I'm telling you the user story, not the epic. As a businessman, on on a ticketing counter on an airline, he wants the queue size to be not more than 15 minutes. That is what he wants. Persona is the businessman. What he wants is the queue size should not be more than 15 minutes. And what is the benefit? As if he can board the flight well in time. You understand my point? So this is the user story, but that is customer may not go down, drill down to that level. He might be explaining that the various people would be coming to the counter and businessmen should not wait for more than 15 minutes and other people, the economy class may have a wait for 30 minutes. So they're separate user stories. They're separate features, right? So if there is an epic, we think this cannot be addressed in one user story, we have to break that down into smaller features as if the user stories could be explained or designed. Right? In a way, I am trying to tell you that epic addresses a feature or more. A user story addresses a feature or part of the feature. Right? And when we have done if a user story addresses a part of a feature, then say it has two parts. So when two user stories have been completed, this feature will stand completed. The second feature has three user stories. When those three user stories are completed, that feature also stands completed. That means that epic would be complete. Because all the features in that epic have been addressed.
In that example, we have a businessman who wants to
reduce the queue wait time.
Who wants to reduce the queue time so that he can make his flight on time.
Yes, right.
If that's the user story, what would be the epic for that?
Okay, epic could be very general that all people should be able to board the flight in time.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Now that has got various classes of people. There are like business class people. There are the economy class people and all that. They are not treated exactly the same way. You see, there is more protocol given to the people who work for the business class. They are treated first. They are kept into short queues. They are sent to the for the boarding earlier into the plane, right?
Okay, so epic is like more high level. Everyone on, all customers should be able to board and blah 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 for 20 minutes, for example. And then in there you have one user story for business people. You have another user story for like elite members, for example.
Yes, exactly.
Or business class people.
Yes.
That's all of the user stories. Okay.
You can even have a user story for the airline staff, which is going to be air hostesses and pilots and all.
Mm-hmm.
When should they board?
Okay. But either way, you need them to be boarded within 20 minutes. That's your epic, for example.
The staff should be boarded before the business people are other people are there. And then again, the cleaning staff, there could be a user story for them. They should have completed their work before the staff can get into the plane.
Okay, so it might be everyone needs to be on board within an hour.
There could be, the big epic can be broken down into 5-10 different user stories.
Okay, clear.
And once all that is done, automatically you see that will give you the sequence because it is an order of priority. Cleaning staff must clean earlier before the pilots and staff is to board. Pilot and staff must have boarded as if the business people can be boarded. And then the economy class is automatically a sequence, but we are not talking about, we are talking more about a priority rather than a sequence, right? If that is understood, we are moving on to the next one. Okay.
I shared 2 diagrams in the chat box.
Okay. Let me see. 2 definitions. Yeah, this is the definition for the epic and the feature. Epic is a large body of work that can be broken down into smaller pieces, which could be called features or user stories. But as I said, every user story must address not more than a feature. But it is very much possible that some features may not be addressed by a single user story. So there might be a possibility that there are more than one user stories to cover one feature. But epics may have many features. epics can take months to complete. Therefore, they are not eligible to be called a user story, because user story should be much smaller than an iteration size. Feature is a set of related requirements that allow the users to satisfy a business objective or need. So the business or objective for our need was basically to keep the queue size short, right? That was the feature. But that feature had different stories in it. A story for a businessman, a story for economy class and all that. That's why that feature has to be broken down. If that did not need to have many stories and one user story could accomplish the feature, we would suffice with that. But our requirement is broken down, or the epic is broken down into a number of features. I hope you understand that. Okay, coming to the prioritize and refine backlog. This is quite simple because we have been talking all about it all the time, and we understand that all the user stories in the product backlog has to be ordered in the order of priority, right? That is our first and foremost requirement in Agile, that things should be done in the priority. Highest priority items must be addressed in the start. So this prioritization, because the requirements are open, they are always coming and they are always trickling into the product backlog. So that means we have to do this prioritization on a continuous basis. Though when we start, before starting the first iteration or the first release, we do have done some kind of product backlog refinement or prioritization, but that is not sufficient, because by the time we have completed our first iteration, there might have been new requirements added to the backlog, and they have to be prioritized alongside the other things. They have to be accommodated within the list of priority. Maybe a new requirement comes as a top requirement, highest priority item, and that goes on top of the list. So for the next iteration, when we consider the items to be included in that iteration, we may pick that new requirement, which is now the highest priority, and we can select few more, which we can handle in that iteration. So this refinement is continuous in nature. Product owner and customer are continuously adding new requirements to the product backlog, and it is the responsibility of product owner to keep it in an order of priority. And to do that, although it is not the responsibility of the team, but team comes to the help and rescue of product owner, because this is too much work. So whenever team is not doing anything else, they are helping the product owner in prioritizing, refining, grooming the product backlog, because they need the product backlog in a perfect order of priority, as if they can start their next iteration, because they have to pick the highest priority items from there. So once the first iteration is completed, or any iteration is completed, that is where the refinement will happen, or grooming will happen, right? And refinement and grooming, these are the two terms I am using for further prioritization before an iteration can be started. Further prioritization of the product backlog before we can start the next iteration. So this after every iteration, we are doing this grooming and refinement. That means it allows for reorganization and reprioritization of work to complete higher priority items that deliver value first. This is the characteristic of the high priority item, that if it is done first, it will deliver value first, and they are carrying the highest value. That's why they are being prioritized. And as we do understand, if there are any epics, we will break them into user stories. Yes, good.
In a digital project, for example, I'm creating a new online portal for customers, right? We have our IT department who is doing all of the development.
Right.
So they are the one that comes up with the releases. They're the one that comes up with the, with the sprints and all of that. And then once it gets released, then we, the business, right, is the one who does the testing of it. Right? The testing of this. In this scenario, I'm a little bit confused. Who is the product owner?
Product owner is, I think, who is collecting the requirement from the customers.
And in your case, you mean to say it is the development department who is doing it?
Well, there is three, isn't it? We have the customers who will be using the website.
And who are actually giving the requirements out?
The person who's giving the requirement is the business. So the business is providing the requirement to the IT department so that they know what to build.
Okay.
In this scenario, the customer is the business and the product owner is IT, isn't it?
Actually, a department cannot be a product owner. Product owner is a person. Product owner is a person, and this is the guy who's the sponsor of the project. And he is deeply involved in the formation of the product backlog, product roadmap. So this cannot be a department. Well, but you are mentioning in a way, it looks like a DevOps environment. DevOps, you heard about it? DevOps means development and operations. It is written like this, and it represents development and operations. Now, I don't know what your IT department is doing and what the other people are doing, but one of them is doing development and one of them is doing operations. Right? Yeah. Now, this development thing is where the agile project is happening.
Yeah.
This is your project team. And operations team are actually giving them, they are acting like customers. They are giving them the requirements. So let us deal with them as if they are customers, right? But because it is an organizational environment and this is not just our project you are going on with, so this is your permanent customer for infinite time. This project is never going to end. In a DevOps environment, they have a infinity loop where this is development, the project team, and this is operations. Or you can call it the customer. And this is the project, agile project, right? So what is happening here in a IT oriented organization, that they're not working for a customer, they're working for operations. Operations have given them the initial requirements, and the agile project has developed a product backlog and everything according to that. And while they are delivering this to the operation may keep coming up with new requirements. They keep adding to the product backlog. You keep doing them, and this cycle goes on and on forever. Now, this DevOps thing defies the basic principle of project, that project has an end date.
Mm-hmm.
This becomes an operational, ongoing kind of a thing, but the portion where the development is happening, that behaves like an agile project.
Mm.
Now you tell me, which department is doing what?
The development team is the IT department.
Okay.
The operations is the sales department.
Which are
Because
giving the requirement all the time.
Correct. It's the sales who represent our actual customers. They are the one who provide the requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And the project sponsor is sitting in the sales department.
Right. But this is going to be not an infinite kind of a cycle. Your cycle is like a DevOps, but in that every set of requirements is dedicated for different assignment, isn't it? Sales people are coming up with new projects. So rather than getting the development department through with the customer directly, which should have been done, they are taking on the responsibility to deal with the customer themselves. The sales department is trying to deal with the customer themselves. There is a risk in this kind of a thing that there is going to be a misinterpretation from customer to sales to development or the agile team. So to reduce that confusion, you must get the product owner of the team, of the project team, of the project directly with the customer. I would strongly suggest that if you're not working in a DevOps environment, because in DevOps environment, it is always internal matter. One department is originating new work and keep sending them to the development team, which is the agile team. You are trying to act like that, but you are actually dealing with different projects. So I will very strongly recommend that your agile team must have direct access to the customer. They should be able to negotiate and talk with the customer. The product owner should be the only person talking to the customer. But you have actually created a new channel. You have put in the sales team, and now that is kind of a dictatorial kind of a setup where whatever the sales team understands, they will tell to the agile team, which is indirect communication.
Okay. So in that example, the product owner is the salesperson, and they are responsible for prioritizing the work and the backlog, but they should really be talking to the customer directly to avoid misinterpretation or anything like that.
Yes, you are very right.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to the next slide. There is a small quiz for you. Which two stakeholders perform project scope planning? Now, please understand that we are talking about the Shoppe Lifestyle Center, which is a hybrid project. Please keep that in mind. Ang Fen is the project manager of that. Helen Gray is the product owner of that project. Eugene Louis is the project sponsor, and then we have the project team. Two of these stakeholders actually in this hybrid project would be responsible for project scope planning. What do you think who they should be?
A and B.
Project manager and product owner. Okay, think again. Tahir, what do you think?
Product owner. B and project sponsor and product owner, are they same?
That is the answer you are giving purely from the agile point of view, right?
Yes.
And
so it's predictive. This is A and C, I guess.
A and C, project sponsor and project manager, this is completely predictive. These are the two roles only existing in predictive. How do in a hybrid project, work is done by the team right? And the
So
highest
one
level,
is project manager, A.
yes.
Uh,
A and
then
B are the
is
correct
B
answers,
is, yes.
right?
D is the
In a
project team.
hybrid
Yeah.
project, this is the only opportunity. We have got a sponsor, we have got a project manager, we have got a product owner, we have got a team lead and the team. So team
Yes.
lead and team, we consider them as a team. So project team works at the bottom level, and the project manager works at the top level of predictive. So A and D would be the right answer.
Yes.
Next question, Antoine,
So
who is the
in
project manager?
predictive,
Yes,
so
please.
in predictive, it
If
would be
it
the
was
project,
predictive,
it would be
then
the project manager.
yeah, then it
But
is a
in
project
agile,
manager.
it would be the project team that would do the scope planning. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. But because it is agile also, and in agile, team
Mhm.
There's a project
team
sponsor
plans
and
everything for
project owner,
themselves.
product owner. Yeah.
So team and the project manager, they are in a hybrid project, they would be working. Okay. And when who is a project manager wants to give the executive team an overview of the work ahead at the next strategy meeting. Next strategy meeting. Which artifact should he show them? Before the next strategy meeting, what should he show them? A scope management plan, a product roadmap, a scope statement, or a work breakdown structure.
Ang Fin wants to give the executive team an overview of the work ahead. It's
This is
either
scope
A,
management. Scope
It is a
management plan,
hybrid
yeah.
environment, minded. What
it's
is
either
common in both?
it's either A or D.
Product
A or
roadmap.
D, they are both predictive.
Okay,
I
then
respect your opinion, but there is no link to the hybrid here.
okay, then I
It's
think it's B.
is it B?
It's
B is the
roadmap.
only correct answer because that is the link between the predictive and the agile part,
Hmm.
right? So product roadmap would be the right answer here.
What does a product roadmap look like again?
It's like a timeline. You remember I did tell you it's a straight line on which you say
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Now we have a couple of questions here. The
Yeah.
project manager informed the project sponsor that the project management plan will continuously increase in the level of detail as the project moves forward. In project management, what is this process known as? Very simple.
Okay. This is progressive elaboration.
It's
Good.
either A or B.
Okay. Continuously increase in the level of detail. How does a life cycle continuously increase in the level of detail as the project moves forward? Life
Because the
cycle has nothing to do
progressive,
with that. Life cycle
That's
is set
B.
up, selected in the
then
beginning.
it's B.
It's B.
It has to be B because we
Yes.
described the concept of progressive elaboration, and that was the exact definition, continuously increase in the level of detail as we pass on with the time.
Yeah.
Our business is unclear on the direction and when features are to be expected for an agile managed project, minded agile project. What project artifact helps communicate the goals, milestones, and potential deliverables, releases, or other product work outputs?
I think product roadmap.
Okay, Nurul?
A.
What is your opinion, Nurul?
It's same like the product roadmap, the straight line, I think.
Because it is a project, it is an agile project, which is clearly mentioned. In agile project, we do not call project charter, we call it project vision statement, right?
Is it
Yes.
C?
C, requirement documentation is only happening in predictive project, not in agile.
Okay, fine. It's A.
So it is ultimately A. Which is the best elicitation technique to use when your project team wants to facilitate a discussion with a certain set of users to get a better understanding of how they might use your project product?
B.
Yeah, B.
Bravo, very right. A project team is reviewing the requirement documentation that are responsible for working on which project artifact can they reference to see the connection between the requirements and the business and project objective.
This is
A.
A. Yeah.
Very right. In which of the following situations would brainstorming be an appropriate technique? Where do you use brainstorming in
Conflict.
the most in this? Yes, please.
Conflict resolution.
Conflict
A.
resolution. Nurul, your point of view?
I agree.
I don't.
But it must be D. Running a stand-up meeting.
I don't agree with you.
I don't think it's D, because running a stand-up meeting has to be quite
Let's discuss.
in a way.
If it is a conflict between two people, right, how can you be creative? You listen to both sides logically and try to resolve their issue. That is a logical matter. That is not a creative matter. You can't say, okay, let us think of a dream, let's fly, let's do this. You can't do that.
It's C.
It is C, identifying and prioritizing options is the only option where we actually
Yes.
can think out of the box. You can't do it in a
Yes.
stand-up meeting. Stand-up meeting is a logical thing, what we have done today and what we are going to do tomorrow. Sprint review and demo. Also, this is, you are presenting something to someone. How can you be creative there? So C is the only option which is correct from this point of view. So please mind it, in conflict resolution, we cannot be creative, right? Rather, I would say, if at all you think, yes, to resolve a conflict, sometimes you have to do some out-of-the-box activity. Yes, I do agree, but the most appropriate answer is C. Okay, which of the following is an agile method to prioritize project objective? Remember, we have talked about it. Which of them is a prioritization method? I am talking about a method.
Moscow analysis.
What do you think, Nurul?
Plan.
I forgot what Moscow is, so I'm going to
must have,
should have, could have, and won't have.
Yes.
Oh yeah, D.
D. And Tahir, but you were thinking twice about the planning poker. Planning poker is not a method. Planning poker is a tool.
Exactly.
Okay, moving on. Your company is designing a game for families. Now, I want your attention here. Your company is designing a game for families. They test whether the game is easy enough for children by creating a prototype and then establishing their test criteria. They create test groups of 100 boys and 100 girls between the ages of 3 and 5 at 50 schools across 30 regions. Then they modify and implement the prototype across the country. What process are they engaged in?
Basically, statistical sampling.
They are, it does sound like statistical sampling, isn't it, Tahir? But I'm going to go with, it looks like they're designing an experiment, right?
In
But
designing an
then
experiment, you
they are
have
designing,
only couple of options.
I
For
know, and
example, you are
we
trying
don't
to
hear. I think they're benchmarking.
they are benchmark.
And
Okay, let me describe each one of them. Benchmarking is to try to find out best practices and you compare yourself with your competition. In this example, in this question, we are not talking about the competition. We are talking about uh, some kind of analysis, right? Design of experiments means that to do certain thing, there are more than one methods. You want to choose which is the best method, right? For example, to bake a cake, you know three methods. So how would you do the experiment? You will take three ovens simultaneously and cook the cake in each one of them with a different method.
Yeah.
Once you have done that, you will present this cake to the audience and ask their opinion which is the best method. And based on their voting, you decide and select your best design by this experiment.
Okay.
So this is not addressing this question at all.
Yeah.
So what are we left with?
C and D.
C and D. So which is more appropriate out of C and D?
C.
See, when you are playing with a lot of numbers, when you are taking a test group is like a statistical sample, right? For example, there are elections going on in your country and there is a pre-election poll conducted. Do you think it is a complete, it's like a full election? No, they just take out 100 people from this district, 100 people from that district, and they ask them to poll. And whatever the results are, they are the representative results of that district. They are considered as a representative results of that district. This is not a complete poll. This is a sample poll. So this is called statistical sampling. That is why C is the correct answer here. That's why I told you to look at this question very carefully, because if you could, I emphasize on the word test groups, which actually focuses on the sample.
Yep.
This question I have already talked about. I have shown it to you. So, no, sorry, I did not show it to you. What is
No,
the
what is it?
purpose of decomposing the project work within the hierarchical WBS structure? So, which is the correct answer? Tahir, you will answer later. Let Nurul answer
Oh,
first.
okay.
A.
A. Tahir, do you agree with that?
Sir, I'm reading. A.
A is the correct answer, definitely. To create
Yeah,
smaller, more manageable chunks that can be better estimated for schedule, cost, schedule resources, and that help control the project. Very good.
basic
Okay, this is a very
activity
simple
level.
question. A business is anxious to get a portion of the project creation out into the marketplace to get end user feedback. Focus on to get end user feedback and impressions before the entire product is finished. What must the project team establish for their release to end users?
A.
MVP. A.
Mhm. A.
Yes.
Nurul, you agree with that?
Yeah. A.
Good. So we are done with the scope part, and we are going to move to schedule, which is much awaited by Nurul. But before that, if you like, we can have a break.
Sure,
Lovely.
sir.
Okay, let's have our 20-minute break.
Thank you.
See you soon.
See you.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So we are moving on to the favorite topic, schedule.
Yes.
Right. So first of all, we will talk about the traditional predictive scheduling, and then we come over to the agile scheduling. So starting with it, this is the comparison between the predictive approach and the agile approach. In predictive projects, generally, what we do as a project manager, naturally, we have already developed a scope. So having the scope statement, we have a ground to start establishing the work packages, meaning that, start breaking down the work packages. Work packages were created in the scope. You remember that?
Yeah.
So those work packages are broken down to the activity level, that is the first job. Then we establish a sequence. Sequence means dependencies and precedence relationship, they are determined. What should be done first, it is not the priority basically, this is the nature of the work, right? Until and unless this is done, that cannot be done. So this is a precedence relationship. But the important thing about a predictive project is that everything which is identified as an activity must be done. You can't pick and choose that which activities we will do and which activities we will not do. Everything has to be done. No matter how important, high priority or low priority, everything has to be done. Therefore, when we develop a dependency relationship or a precedence relationship, all the activities must be connected in that framework. That is called a sequence diagram, or in other words, a network diagram. Once we have done that, we identify the duration of each activity. We estimate in a very meticulous manner based on some average resource availability. Why I'm saying that? Because the resource we have yet not studied, and resources have to be known as if I can estimate the correct duration. So because that resource assignment is not available to us right now, so we will take on an approximate average resources which are likely to be available, and we develop our duration estimate based on that. Now you must clearly understand that once we are doing that, we are taking a chance. What if the resources do not make themselves available in the required quantity which I thought about? That means my activity duration will be affected by any change in resources or even cost. I hope you understand that. Once we already have the activities defined, their durations estimated, and their dependencies determined, now is the time that we can put it all together into our network diagram. Your network diagram originally did not mention any durations. It just mentioned the name of the activity and how is it connected to the next activity or the previous activity. That was all we knew about the network diagram. Only the dependencies and precedence relationship is established. Now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to populate that network diagram with the activity duration, the average activity duration, which I have just calculated. And once I have those activity durations mentioned on the network diagram, this is the time when I can develop a critical path. So a simple question, what if you know the duration of all the activities? Can you estimate the duration of the whole project?
Yes.
How do you do that?
Uh, By doing the critical path analysis,
Okay,
like how
very good.
much time it will take.
Right. So that is the key. Without doing the critical path analysis, you cannot determine the duration of the project. You might have determined it earlier, but that was an approximation. That was a guesswork. Right now, we are going to do a detailed calculation. We are going to find exactly how much time this project is going to take, right? So that can only be determined if we populate the duration data with onto the network diagram and do certain calculations, thus finding the critical path, which, as Nurul already said, critical path is the longest path amongst the paths available, and this is the shortest possible time in which the project can be completed. Right? So you remember that definition, that is a critical path. We'll talk about it. Okay, after that, we do two things. One is, if there is any adjustments to be made in resources, if there are resources over allocated to an activity, we have to smoothen it out. We have to take them away. So we do resource over allocations, we resolve them. And on the other hand, we could have another problem throughout the project life cycle. We will find problems coming up, and due to which we are getting delayed and things like that. And you have a lot of pressure to compress your schedule as if we can still finish on the declared end date of the project. So there comes a reason to compress your schedule. So we'll talk about these things also, but all of these things are happening only in a predictive project. Now, how does things happen in an agile project? We have time boxed cadences, like, our iteration size is fixed. We fix that in the beginning.
Mhm.
We do have a release roadmap, product roadmap, and release timelines are mentioned. So adopt those release timeframes. Then we plan each iteration at a time. And in each iteration, we perform the work. In the product backlog, we prioritize the stories and all. And from there, we are picking up our work for the iterations. And we are planning the iteration. Within the iteration, we break those user stories further into tasks. And that task is again prioritized, and we do some kind of estimation, not exactly as the activity duration estimate we did in the predictive, but this estimate is different. But we do some kind of estimation. We decompose the user stories into tasks, and we determine the iteration velocity. Now, what is iteration velocity? What is the difference between speed and velocity? Simple physics. Speed and velocity. How do you differentiate between them? You are driving your car.
Speed is like telling you it's a static number, whereas velocity has a factor of the wind and maybe.
Exactly. No, not wind. It is overtime. Velocity is overtime.
Okay.
Speed is, if you look at your speedometer while you are driving, this is your speed. Right now you are driving at 60 miles per hour. And later you find it is 20 miles per hour. So you see, your speed is changing all the time. But the average of all the speeds will give you your velocity. At the end of the journey, if you can do an average of all the speeds you have gone through during your journey, it will give you that you have traveled at a speed of approximately 66.5 miles per hour. Right? Now, this is not called mile per hour, 6.6 miles per hour square. Velocity is time square. But anyways, I'm not going into that debate. let us get back to the iteration velocity. When we start an iteration, naturally, we are a new team. We may not have worked together. These 10 people in the iteration, they might not have worked together earlier, so we don't understand each other very well. But each one of us are experts in what we do, and we do have a capacity to handle certain amount of work, right? So we evaluate the capacity of all the members of the team, and we try to guess how much work can be handled together in an iteration. And we determine a figure for approximate figure for the velocity we would like to have achieved in our iteration. That is calculated usually in terms of story points. Why story points? Why can't we calculate it on basis of the user stories? That is because some user stories are more complex than others. Some will take more time, some will take more money, some will take more resources. So there is a lot of calculation, which otherwise in a predictive project, we do all these three calculations, the activity duration, the activity cost, and the activity resources. But here in Agile, we adopt a completely different method. We do not, you see, why we adopt a different method? Because resources are fixed. We are 10 people. Time is fixed because we are having just 2 weeks. And cost is also fixed because we can do a certain amount of work during these 2 weeks. So approximately the cost is also fixed. So this is really very interesting. How are we going to calculate our velocity? So we say, okay, the level of work we can handle is according to the level of difficulty of the work, we can handle 500 story points together. All 10 of them. Collectively, the team can handle 500 story points. Now, what is the story point? Story point basically is the level of complexity of the user story. A story which is more complex, when I say complex, it means which might take more time or resources or cost, we call it complex. We allocate it a number. That user story number 1 is very complicated. So let us say, let us allocate 60 story points to user story number 1. So team decides how many story points are allocated. No detailed calculations are involved. Again, I am saying we do not do the activity duration estimate, activity cost estimate, or activity resource estimate. They are not done in our agile project. Rather, we resort to the method of user stories. We allocate due to the approximate, level of complexity in each story. A easier story may get 10 points, story points. A difficult story might get 60 or 70 story points. And that way, we already know that we can handle 500 story points in an iteration. So when we are picking work from the backlog, we will pick that much work, which counts to almost 500 story points, right? So 70 plus 10 plus 30 plus this. When you reach the figure of 500 or close to that, we say, okay, that is all. These many stories we are going to take away into our iteration. And those stories might have come out to be 12 user stories or 500 story points. So we will pick them up and we'll move them there. So what we have done is we have assumed our iteration velocity of 500, but naturally, because we have not worked together before, so we don't know exactly if we really can achieve this 500 figure, or we can exceed it, or we may not be able to complete it, right? So after the iteration has been completed, we would learn what had been our speed during this iteration, and we refine our velocity figure according to that. And with every new iteration, we keep improving our velocity. So this is, very briefly, I have described the estimation process, the prioritization, the decomposition. So basically, this is how we do it. We establish all these things, and then we work with the product owner to refine the backlog. Once our iteration is complete, we go back to our backlog, to the product owner, and we together work to reprioritize, refine, and groom the product backlog uh, to help the product owner for those requirements which have been added during the time the iteration was going on. I hope now you can very clearly understand the difference between the predictive method of scheduling and agile method of scheduling, but I will describe it in further details.
So you're saying in the agile ways of working, you might start with one user stories and identify what is the speed of completion of that.
Yeah.
An estimation for your entire roadmap per se, because velocity is distance over time. So you may know how many user stories, but you don't necessarily know the time. So you start with one and then you alter, whether that's doable or not in terms of
we are going to measure the velocity in story points, not user stories.
Okay, in story points.
Because user stories are not all equal. So story points is a very good figure with which we establish a velocity. Although I don't mind if you can do it according to user stories, if you can assure me that all user stories are of equal size, then I can work with user stories. But because that is not sure, so I would rather go with the figure of user stories, story points for establishing the iteration velocity.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, moving on. We are now talking about predictive only. As you remember, in a predictive environment, we have got different knowledge areas, and schedule is one of them. For every knowledge area, we develop a management plan, which is not a detailed plan. I said before, it is just an instruction, a guideline, how to do the detailed planning. So in this case, we have all the guidelines available about schedule management, about how to do the schedule management that is given in the schedule management plan. It does not have the calculations, but it has the parameters, it has the guidelines, it has the rules, policies, and procedures, detailed policies and procedures for doing everything we have to do in the process of scheduling. So it tells us how are we going to, describe activities by breaking them down from the work packages to the activity level, how this could be done, what are the things to take care of, what are where you have to pay more attention. These guidelines are there with regard to the breakdown of the activities. Then it will tell us what kind of scheduling method should you be using and scheduling tools you should be using. It should give you a kind of a format for your schedule. It establishes certain criteria for developing and controlling the schedule. So this schedule management plan may be tailored for use in any type of project. But you see, this is specifically being developed for this schedule management, for this project. Therefore, this is customized to this project. These instructions are customized for this project, but for next project, you may take a copy of this, amend it according to the needs of the next project, and go ahead with that. It defines the maintenance process for updating status and records progress in the schedule model during execution. How the reporting is to be done, how the data is to be recorded. This is also told in the schedule management plan. Now, because this thing happens only in predictive, not in agile. So what does the hybrid do? In a hybrid approach, a schedule management plan does exist, but it is only as far as the predictive portion of the project goes. It doesn't go down to the details of user stories because user stories cannot be addressed like that. Well, if it is a hybrid project, you could mention briefly how the user stories are going to be handled, how the iterations are going to be made, and things like that. That could be included in your customized schedule management plan. But as I said, schedule management plan is no detail. We don't know the names of the activities. We don't know the dependencies as yet. But all the ways, principles, and methods are advised here in quite a bit of detail. What should be included as part of the schedule management plan? These are some of the headings you should include in your schedule management plan. For example, about schedule model, what is the methodology or tool you are using for developing your schedule? And what is the, you have to include the maintenance planning. How often are you going to maintain this schedule, including status updates and progress during the execution? Okay, one interesting thing is accuracy. When you are kind of estimating a duration and you say this activity can be done in 3 days, are you really sure about it? How accurate is this figure of 3 days? How accurate is it? How can you say that? How can you express the accuracy of this figure?
I don't know. It's typically high-level estimation.
Yes, of course. But not that high level. It is quite, we are going down to the activity level, right? But yes, you are right that this is an approximation. We say it can be done in 3 days. That means there must be some margin of error in your mind. I'm asking about that margin of error. To what level of accuracy you are correct about 3 days?
You're probably thinking if I was to like build a new racking, for example, I'll get a quote from the racking company and they will tell me it takes, I don't know, a day to put the racking up, and then it takes another day for quality control, and then roughly it takes about 3 days, and then you put another, I don't know, you put a week.
You put 3 days here, but what if their estimate goes wrong? How sure are you that this can be done in 3 days? Maybe it takes 4 days.
Not that sure. I typically go, let's do 50% contingencies.
That's too much.
Okay.
Okay. Right now, what I'm saying is
all the things will revise.
Yes, please.
All the things will revise according
Yeah,
if
they will keep
there is any
revising. They will keep
change. Yeah.
revising. But how accurate is my estimate? I would like to have some kind of like we did in quality. Accuracy we discussed in quality. We talked about quality and we said that you see plus minus how much time it can fluctuate.
20%.
Right? 20%, 10%, 5%. So lesser the percentage, more is the accuracy, isn't it? If it is 0%, is completely accurate. So there is always some accuracy. So you can say, okay, I am saying 3 days, but give and take 2 hours plus or minus, it can be delayed or it can be done earlier. So this is the level of accuracy I'm working with. And for different projects, the level of accuracy might change. Maybe for a nuclear project, you probably can't have this kind of accuracy. You could be accurate down to a very precise level. Therefore, this accuracy level might fluctuate from one project to the other. How are you
As I think,
measuring your time? Are you measuring it in hours, days, or weeks? You have to mention that. Because you can't do that, that one activity is mentioned as 2 weeks and other activity is mentioned as 5 days. This should be in the same unit. If you are doing days, then everything is in days. If you are doing weeks, everything is in weeks. Then we have got organizational procedural links. You remember when we developed the work breakdown structure, there was a coding system there. In the work breakdown structure, there was a coding system. Do you remember that?
yes.
1.1, 1.1.1, remember that?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Now, your work package was, say, 1.2.1.3, right? So your activities should be numbered accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
They would be further numbered downwards, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it will be 1.2.1.3.1, that is one activity, and so on. So while you do that, this is the method given for how to use the organizational procedure links. This is provided in your schedule management plan. Then you establish the control threshold. Now, control threshold is different from accuracy. Accuracy was your estimate, accuracy of the estimate. Control threshold is for monitoring purposes, for monitoring the scheduled performance before taking any action. You say, if my schedule gets out of the line up to this much amount, I will not take any action. If it exceeds this level, I will take an action myself. If it exceeds this level, it is beyond my power to take action. So I will escalate this matter to the next boss. You see, control thresholds establish various levels who can take, where certain actions are to be taken, right? So if we are not to take an action, that means we are within the range of acceptance. This much was expected. This activity could have delayed to this much time. So we are okay with it. But anything beyond that, we should immediately take action, right? I have, as a project manager, I have a limitation. I cannot make decisions which are affecting the timeline. So if it is within the timeline, I can correct the problem. Otherwise, I have to escalate it through a change request to my bosses, to the sponsor, as if they can give the decision, because that decision will change the baseline and the whole plan. Therefore, I have no authorization for that. So you define the control thresholds, then you establish the rules for performance measurement. And we will talk about a very interesting method, which is called earned value method. We use that for the performance measurement purposes. But whatever methods are advisable in your project, they will be mentioned in your schedule management plan. Then what is the requirement for reporting? How frequently and in what format you would be reporting your scheduled performance to various stakeholders? Maybe you would not be sending just one kind of report to everyone. You could be originating 10 different kinds of reports. But what are going to be the frequency and format of those reports regarding scheduling? Last but not the least is the process description. It describes how the schedule management processes are to be documented. That is documentation of the process. So these are some of the most important topics which must be included in your schedule management plan, but this does not constrain ourselves that these are the only topics. There could be other topics or headings you can add into your schedule management plan format. You create your own formats. I told you before. For your project or for your organization, you develop your own format. And as a PMO, this is the responsibility of PMO to develop standardized formats. Okay, moving on. Okay, tell me, we have talked about benchmarking a bit. Look at the definition of benchmarking and briefly describe to me. You already know what I mean by benchmarking. So you describe in your words, what do you think about benchmarking? You can read this definition or text here and then tell me.
Basically, kind of best practices we have to consider.
Actually, we are trying to hunt for best practice. Right now, we don't know. We are doing benchmarking to adopt certain best practices. We don't
Compare
know the
your
best practice.
performance with the competitive
Exactly.
Competitive environment, like with their competitors.
Right. Our competitors can be other projects or other organizations who are doing similar projects.
Yes.
So we will compare ourselves with them.
Exactly.
That is our competition. And naturally, people would have been performing better than us. If somebody is performing better than us, then we will look curiously towards them, try to find what they are doing right and what we are not doing right. And we will try to adopt those practices as best practices and try to not only catch up to them, but exceed them if possible. That is a mission. You kill your competition. Yes,
it's
please.
quite a natural thing to do, isn't it? Like when I was, earlier today, when I was creating my project schedule, right? Well, it wasn't me, it was one of the staff member. But the first thing I do is look at other project schedules, right? And then you have a look which one is more appropriate for what we're trying to do and what did we do well last time. And then you compete with your own projects in a way. How can we make it better? But I can't go external to look at other people's project schedules. I can only compare it with what I have.
Yes, but benchmarking is more useful when you can compare yourself with your competition.
But who would give you that project schedules?
What stops you from observing case studies and other projects? What stops you from learning?
From where?
Maybe there are case studies available all over.
Really? Like people publish these things?
Yes, of course. The case studies are available. Or if you are too curious, you can get in touch with other organizations and seek help. How do you do this thing? What is the documentation you created? For your guidance, you could get in touch with them. That is when you are in good relationship with other organizations or, for that matter, other project managers.
Wow.
I'm not asking them to leak their trade secrets. I'm just asking them to share their experiences. And you learn from them. If possible, if you could do that, that is the only way of moving upward towards the best practice. But you can do the benchmarking, as you said, within your organization. But there are two ways. One thing is called historical data. That is not benchmarking. That is the historical data available with us, and we try to adopt it. That is one thing. Other thing is, another project within the same organization is doing some similar practices, but they're doing better than us, that we can benchmark ourselves with them as well. I personally feel that it would be much more useful if we are benchmarking outside of the organization. That would be beautiful.
Oh, you've challenged me, Suhail. You've challenged me. I mean, we have we service so many different customers, right? But we've never really asked, like one of the biggest retailer in New Zealand. You know, we supply a lot to them, and I've never really gone into their project team and say, hey, would you like to do a knowledge sharing on a case study on a recent project that you launch? And, you know, let's do a knowledge sharing. I mean, the
That could
worst
be a
thing
very
they
good
can say,
exercise.
I mean, the worst thing they can say is no, right?
No,
But
there could be kind of a trade. You could say, I can share my case studies, you can share your case studies. Let's make a group and try to discuss things out there. As if we can find, naturally, it's a common knowledge, as if we can find the best practices existing within our organizations.
Have you done this before?
Well, we keep doing that in open sessions, like when we have got, actually, if you go to the projectmanagement.com website, they have got a lot many case studies, templates, and all these things available, but they're not exactly, you have to match appropriate case studies to your need, right?
Really?
But
Projectmanagement.com.
projectmanagement.com. This is a website owned by PMI.
Yeah.
And you can always benefit from it a lot.
How interesting.
But I would still say that benchmarking, the best approach is to look at the live competitor, right? Rather than, learning from others' experiences. Anyways, so we assess the feasibility in the initial state of the scheduling, that is all done in benchmarking. And historical data, as you understand, we already hold the data of the older project we have done. So we can learn from them. And naturally, we do not try to commit those mistakes which they have committed. Hybrid schedules, naturally, you do understand, tailoring is a very common feature in project management. Even if you are doing a predictive project, you do a lot of tailoring even within a predictive project. But now the definition extends to the methodologies, that we can tailor our methodology to do the project. We can do our project in a predictive manner, or a hybrid manner, or an agile manner. So that's why we are now talking about the hybrid schedule. Tailored plans to combine consistency and management oversight with flexible scheduling of work, meaning you try to get the best of both the worlds, the agile world and the predictive world. So that's why we are tailoring something in between. Better product, deliverable quality with incremental and short-term value delivery and change incorporated at intervals. So we take, this is the best of that word, the agile. We can gain speed, flexibility, and change, and all that. That comes handy to us if we use some agile approaches. And product delivery can be divided into subsets according to the milestones and cadence. So we are taking best of both the worlds, and we are trying to use some kind of a agile hybrid approach, which is in between the two. Predictive scheduling, I have already told you this thing. Well, first we break down the work packages into activities, then we determine the dependencies, then we estimate the durations, then we find the critical path, then we resolve the resource over allocations, and then we do the schedule compression. This is all about the predictive scheduling, and we are going deeper into it. First of all, the work breakdown structure. We have already studied that in the scope. I just wanted to mention to you that the smallest level was a work package. Each work package will have to be further broken down into activities, but you need not show it in form of this work breakdown structure. We just keep listing down those activities into a list. We call it an activity list. We develop an activity list according to the same numbering system. For example, in work package 1, the activities would be 1.1.1.1, 1.1.1.2, and so on. Under this work package, the activities will be 1.1.2.1.1, and 2 and 3 and 4, right? So you break down all the work packages. You may come up with hundreds of activities. These hundred of activities must be recorded into an activity list with their numbers and the names of the activities, description of the activity, and few other data items. Just like we created a work breakdown structure dictionary, where we listed down all the work packages, this time I'm asking you to do a list of all the activities, right? And this can only be done in the process of scheduling. This is not the responsibility of scoping. We have done the scope. Now we are in schedule. We are going to, first thing we need to do is to break down the work packages into activities and create a list of all the activities. This list will be used to develop further work of the schedule, and it includes the duration also, which will be calculated and put into it. Once we know the duration, we can actually find out the start date of every activity and the end date of every activity, and naturally the critical path and everything else. So this slide is only just mentioned here for the purposes of showing you that this is the level work package which has to be broken further down into activities. Let's talk about the types of dependencies. Actually, there are two sets of types. One set is called mandatory versus discretionary, and the other set is called external versus internal. Now, what is mandatory dependency? Mandatory dependency is that dependency which has been imposed on you through the contractual requirement. For example, in the contract, it is written that this item has to be delivered on this date. So that is a contractual requirement, and that is a mandatory condition you have to meet. So such a dependency is called a mandatory dependency. A discretionary dependency is, I am saying that, okay, this activity should not start until that activity has finished. But this decision has been taken by the project manager on his discretion. Therefore, this decision may be changed by the project manager. He may allow later that, okay, because we are in a problem, you can start it earlier or something like that. But this is the discretion of the project manager, and project manager can change it. But the mandatory discretions, mandatory dependencies are unchangeable. They are contractual requirements. Okay, this is one set of dependencies. The other set is internal and external. There will be dependencies which are coming from external sources. And when I say external sources, it is your organization, it is the large organization, it is the customer. Anywhere, if a dependency has been imposed to you from any external source, could be considered as an external dependency. And if you are doing it from internally, from within the project, you are deciding it all by yourself, then it is an internal dependency. Now, there is a very, these are not just the types. If you really want to look at the types of dependencies, that would be a combination of first set with the second set. So I can say mandatory, there could be external mandatory requirements and dependencies and internal mandatory dependencies. There could be external discretionary dependencies and there could be internal discretionary dependencies. So can you give me an example of a internal mandatory dependency? Internal mandatory dependence, which you can't change, but that is imposed internally from within the project.
How about certain approval from
Mhm.
higher management.
Very nice. This could be a very good example. Uh, and that has been made a rule, and that cannot be. This is not in contract, but internally that is required.
Mhm.
Very nice. Or you may say that uh, technically it is not possible to do something. For example, until this job is done, technically this is not possible. The second job can be started. So that means this is a internal mandatory dependence. This is
Mhm.
not, it is not written in the contract.
Mhm.
External, we have already very deliberately said that okay, we are supposed to deliver some part of the deliverable by a specific date. So we have an obligation that all those deliverables should be ready before that date, right?
Like the
Now,
bylaw, we have to follow the bylaws. We cannot avoid them.
mhm.
If it comes in external mandatory.
Yeah, of course, that is a part of the contract. If something is against the bylaw, then probably that contract, would be mentioned in the contract.
Yes.
Contract cannot be, you can't start a project to break the law. That is the first principle.
Mhm.
You can't hire, hired killers to do the job, something like that. No, that is illegal. So illegal things cannot be included in mandatory. They are not
I
mandatory.
think, Tahir, maybe you were talking about, for example, if you were making changes to building,
Mhm.
external dependencies would be building inspector to approve before you can commence work. That would be external
Yeah,
mandatory, isn't it?
that could be
Yeah.
made part of the contract. That could be made part of the contract. You could say in your agreement that these are the bylaws which are to be followed, right?
Mhm.
Bylaws are not coming separately. They're coming as part of the contract. Both parties must agree which bylaws to follow and which not to follow.
Mhm.
Okay, I hope you have a clear understanding about these various kinds of dependencies. Although we are not going to mention them a lot, we are more going to talk about other things. So at least this understanding is good to move ahead.
Mhm.
Okay, let's get into the thick of it. This is how a precedence relationship looks like. In blue, on the left-hand side, you can see an activity. Confirm key stakeholder and customer attendance. That is one activity. And only after this activity has been finished, the arrow indicates that another activity can start after that, the red one, that is erect signage with customer branding. So the work on the second activity can start because the arrow is touching the start line of the second activity, and it is being originated from the finish line of the first activity. So that means they have got a finish to start relationship, meaning only after the first activity has finished, the subsequent activity can start.
Mhm.
Is it understandable?
Yes.
Generally, we say, use the terms predecessor or successor. Uh, what do you mean by that? What do you understand by predecessor and successor?
Mm, Basically, the predecessor is the driver,
Is the driver?
uh, and successor is driven by the predecessor.
is driven by the predecessor. Means there is a dependency existing between two activities, and that driver drives that dependency. Driver is in control of that. The predecessor is in control of that. It dictates the condition. It dictates the dependency. Whereas the successor is to follow the rule. Whatever dictation has been given to him, he will do accordingly. Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Nurul, what do you think about it? Do you have any other opinion? How do you describe the predecessor and successor?
I think as Tahir said, predecessor is what comes first that drives the second action.
Okay.
Right? So it starts after the predecessor. It cannot begin. The predecessor is the driver that activates the second one.
Apparently, from this diagram, it looks like that, and you are right. As far as this kind of relationship is concerned, predecessor seems to come first and successor comes later. And by the words also, predecessor means first and successor means later, right? But this definition is not very solid, and it is going to change over time. I'll show you how. But at least in such like condition where the relationship is finished to start, this is going to hold true forever. But there are other kinds of relationship in which this relationship of coming first and coming later is no more true. That's why I acknowledge Tahir's opinion that the predecessor is the driver and successor is the driven, no matter whether predecessor is happening first or happening later, but it is always in a driving seat. It is in a commanding position. And successor is always in a follower position. It is driven by the driver. Meaning, the predecessor is in the driving seat. You are driving the car. The other is a passenger, driven. You're carrying him wherever you are. Once you are done doing your job, then maybe you can hand over the steering wheel to that person and to say, okay, now you drive. And then that person will drive another person or more than one people who are driven by him. Right? Anyways, we'll talk about that later. But so far, your definition seems all right because predecessor in a finish to start relationship will always come first. Right? But this is not the... Yes, please.
If you have a third one, right?
Okay.
The successor will become the driver for the next job.
Yeah, exactly. You are very right. So actually, this is just the relationship between two activities, but there could be relationship in amongst many activities. For example, there is another activity here, and there is another arrow going from there is another arrow going from here to. I'm sorry again. Going from here to here. And then there could be another arrow going from here to here. And there could be another box here. Right? So you see, in this case, this erect signage with customer branding is dependent on two things. There are two predecessors to that. That means both of them are driving him. Right? And this is the driver, and he is to fulfill what they say. Their requirement has to be met. Once this is done and this is done, only then this process, the successor can start. And there is a possibility there are more than one successors. Like we could have like here, we had two successors to this. This activity has this successor as well as this successor. So there might be more than one predecessor, there might be more than one successor, but for the ease of understanding, we are saying any two activities may have a relationship, right? Any two activities may have a relationship, and that is the relationship of predecessor and successor, right? If there is a relationship, that is a predecessor and successor. You have to determine who is the predecessor, who is driving, and who is driven. Now, the finish to start is not the only relationship. We have other relationships which I will be explaining to you. These are the other relationships. We have already talked about finish to start, where the arrow originated from the finish point of activity A and entered into the start point of activity E. Just for the sake of understanding, I would say a start to start relationship is the arrow starts coming out of the start of the first activity, entering into the start of the next activity. I will explain it later, but just try to understand how it is drawn. A start to start relationship could be drawn something like this. A finish to finish relationship could be drawn something like this. A start to finish relationship can be drawn something like this. If you are okay with this, then I can start explaining. The simplest possible relationship is the finish to start relationship. And in any project you are doing, I am sure you are not using any other relationship but the only finish to start relationship. Have you ever used any other relationship?
Yes.
Okay.
I have used start to start.
Start to start, and how does it look like?
It means that when this activity starts, it kicks off all of these other one can start as well.
They can start as well. Okay, I agree with that. But the question is, well, your definition is right. You are right that F activity is dependent on the start of the C activity. If C activity does not start, F activity has no right to start. But I will take you back to the finish to start statement. And I said, activity A must have finished as if activity E can be started. Please focus on the words must and can. The condition is imposed by the predecessor. It says, until I finish, you have no right to start. But after I have finished, the ball is in your game. If you want to start, you can start. That's why the word can is there. It does not really mean that activity E has to immediately start at the end of activity A, but it could be starting any time after A has finished. Right? That means the condition which is imposed by A is E cannot start before the end point of A activity, and after that, I don't mind when you start. You can start 1 day later, 2 days later, or immediately after the A activity has finished. So look at the condition only. Now, when I say start to start, it means C activity should have started as if the F activity can be started. That doesn't exactly mean that in all the cases, C and F are starting together. No, they can start together. That is one option, but F can start anytime after C has started. Similarly, the finish to finish relationship, D must have finished as if the E activity can be finished. E activity is not allowed to finish until it has seen the end of activity D. And after that end of activity D, E activity can end any time after. It can end immediately with activity D or even later, we don't mind. Then we have got a start to finish relationship, although it is the most tricky one. But okay, let's discuss that. Activity D says start to finish says activity D must have started as if the activity F can be finished. Now, in the last two examples, the start to finish and finish to finish, there is no mention when the successor activity is starting. There is no link provided. So that is independent. That means in the finish to finish, activity E could have started anytime. We don't mind. It has no linkage with the activity D. But the only linkage with the activity D is activity D must finish as if the E can finish. Similarly, in the start to finish relationship, what is happening after activity D, we don't know. What has happened before activity F, we don't know. But we know one thing, activity F, which might be ongoing right now, can only finish if activity D has started. Okay. Let me get back to the very first relationship. I said it is the easiest and most commonly used relationship. And most of the projects only have this kind of relationship because people do not know how to use other kinds of relationship. And if you are using a finish to start, yes, please.
It has always been tricky.
Which one?
The SS and the FF.
Yes, of course. That is exactly, that is the point I'm trying to make here. That easiest one is finish to start. That is, even a dumb-wit person who doesn't have any knowledge about project management can say, okay, do this thing and then do that thing, right? This is very simple. A stupid person can plan it. No problem. And most of the activities in a project are planned that way because that is easier to understand. Even the people who are working on those activities, if they are not very intelligent, they can understand this relationship naturally. They would understand, okay, we have to wait for this thing to finish as if we can start, right? This is normal. But when we enter into the domain of start to start and finish to finish, this is where the complication is, where it gives you a mind-bending exercise. People start thinking, okay, after the C has started, we can start F, but then the question arises, what happens after the C and what happens after the F? So they start confusing themselves. They do not focus on the main issue. Main issue is activity C should have started as if activity F can be started. Right? Okay. Naturally, you are waiting for some examples on that. I can give you examples separately for each one of these, but I don't want to give you different examples because that is usually what the teachers do. They give a nice looking example for finish to start, a nice looking example for start to start, and separate examples for each one of them. But I am of the point of view that this is not supposed to be the different example. This is the same example which we have to convert into other relationships. That is the trick of the trade. So let us start with finish to start and say, what is your activity A and what is your activity E? Now, Nurul, you could give me two examples. What is your activity A and what is your activity E? What is predecessor and what is successor in a finish to start relationship? Give me some examples.
Okay, activity A would be the business case has been approved, and activity E is now you can start your kickoff project, your kickoff meeting. You can start to kick it off.
Well, I would say these are things happening before the project. Let's talk about some project type activity.
Okay. It would be when the building when health and safety lead has cleared on the racking safety, then you can put pallets on there.
Okay, that is a mandatory requirement that is anyway to be completed in that manner. We can't change it, right? So let us be more detailed. Something related to the work.
We can take example of foundation and wall work in construction.
Yeah, of course. But Nurul, will you understand that?
So, okay, another example would be that is not mandatory. It would be once you put a line marking on the ground, then the truck can start parking there. Until then, you cannot. How about that? Is that?
Actually, you are giving me things which are like milestones. The first thing you said, that is kind of a milestone. So you are, it is not really an activity. Give me two activities. Two activities which consume time. And you also have to tell me how much time the first activity will take, how much time that the next activity will take. That will be a good example.
Are you talking about like specific details? Like an activity would be like,
yes,
you need to
like Tahir said,
like you need to clean the floor, right?
Yeah.
And then the
Cleaning the
floor
floor
has,
could be an
you need
activity.
to clean the floor. The floor has to dry. That will take about 48 hours before you can start to paint it, for example.
Okay.
So the painting is activity E, and it cannot start until you finished cleaning the floor and you finished
Okay.
drying
And
the floor.
your first activity is to clean the floor, and the second activity is to paint the floor, right?
Correct.
Okay. Wonderful. And just a drying period, we'll talk later, but for the time being, cleaning the floor should have completed. And one more thing, we are not going to refer them as activity A, E, C, F, D, E. We will refer them as predecessor and successor, right?
Okay.
Because in this example, the different alphabets are used in every relationship. So I will refer to that later, why it is done in that manner. But right now, let's call them predecessor and successor. The predecessor is washing the floor must have completed as if the painting of the floor can start. Right? Tahir, you are with me on that?
Yes.
This is quite natural. This is quite understandable. Anybody understands that. Although your drying period, I will take it into account later. But right now, I'm just talking about the two activities. The washing of the floor should have finished as if the painting can start. Right? If I ask you, is it possible that as soon as the washing of floor has started, could you start painting? I am asking you to do start to start. The same two activities. I want you to do start to start.
No.
Is it possible?
No.
No. That is a natural answer. But I don't agree with you. I want you to be, here is the time when you have to be a little bit more creative. You have to come up with a solution because in your project, you don't have time to wait for washing to complete. Find a way that you could do these things in a start to start manner. Find a way. You have to find a way, right? Don't have to say no. You have to find a way. So let's come up with a creative solution. Do out of box thinking.
One activity is like washing the floor.
Yes.
The other activity is painting the wall.
Painting the floor.
Sorry, painting the floor. Okay. Um,
According to Nurul, it painting cannot start until water has the floor has been washed.
they
Is
can start after a limited interval of time, like
interval? I'm not talking right now. I'm not talking about
hmm,
the interval. We'll talk about lag and lead concept. But yes, you are right in saying that. Is it possible? Yes, Nurul. Tahir's point is it possible while the floor is being washed, can we start
Mhm.
the painting from one end?
yes, I think.
You can you can like if you have 10 meters that you have to
Okay.
wash,
Hmm.
you can wash the first 2 meters
Right.
and then you can paint that after, but not at the same time.
Okay. You are saying that this 10 meter has to be subdivided into patches of 2 meters. So you are basically dividing the activities into sub activities.
Correct.
But we are not talking about sub activities. Activity is supposed to be the smallest unit. It cannot or should not be subdivided. Think of some other way. Change
Mm.
your approach, change your technology, do something, think out of the box. That is what I'm asking you.
We can start order the raw material for it.
No, no, that is another activity.
Okay.
Why don't you think about doing the cleaning of the floor without water? You invent some other way by which we can clean the floor without water. That would not force you to kind of, you know, you could have a kind of a suction machine working, which is a very powerful suction machine. It is working and it is moving on the suction machine. Behind that, you start painting. Isn't it possible?
Mm-hmm.
Purpose is to clean the floor, right? To a
Mm-hmm.
desired level. So that desired level, if it can be achieved by an alternate method, why not? Think out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
Can it be possible?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I've never done that before, but if we're talking about a concrete,
That is why I am asking you to brainstorm, to think out of the
Mhm.
box, because you might not ever have done it before. But now I am trying to ask you to invent a new way of working,
I
right?
don't know. I mean, you can ask the cleaning companies, or is this the only method
Okay.
of
So why
cleaning the
don't you do a
floor?
little research on that and find
Mhm.
out that are there other methods of cleaning?
There
And
must be a company out there where you
yes,
must clean and paint at the same time. There must be a need for this.
exactly. That is a
No?
point. That is a point. So
Yeah.
that could be done.
Yeah.
Although your first answer was it cannot be done.
Yeah.
Now you think that it can be done, isn't it?
Mm.
Right? So there is a possibility that we can do it that way. But
Yeah.
you see, in this case, the paint will finish later than the drawing, right? Agreed?
Mhm. Yeah.
In the other example, finish to finish, we are saying that painting might have started anytime. It is not
Mhm.
dependent on the start of the cleaning the what do you say cleaning the floor,
Yeah.
but clean as soon as the cleaning of the floor has been completed, the painting can be completed. But
Hmm.
painting start of the paint is not dependent on
Hmm.
on the start of the cleaning.
Okay.
How could that be possible?
Yeah.
Well, if we think out of the box,
Yeah, you have to.
there are the ways, like we can have paint replacement, like wallpapers. We can go for a wallpaper.
Wonderful, wonderful. There are right now mechanisms that there is kind of a sticker sheet that is even used on roads. The zebra
Yes,
crossings are already printed, and they just put it on, right?
exactly.
They heat it up on the top, and it merges into the ground. So you have to use some new technology, some new thinking, some out of the box thinking, and everything is possible. Although finish to finish relationship is a little bit more tricky than the start to start, but that can also be made possible if you can exercise your mind. You can think out of the box. Both of these techniques apparently do not look possible, but they are very much possible if you can come up with alternate solutions, right? So you can convert the same relationship you initially considered as a finish to start, and they can be converted into start to start or even finish to finish. Let us say the first activity takes 3 days, and the second activity predecessor takes 3 days, and successor takes 5 days. So in a finish to start scenario, what is the minimum time these both activities will take?
2 weeks.
Means 3 plus 5, 8 days, right?
Yeah.
2 weeks means 10 days, if we exclude two days.
Yeah.
So it is exactly 8 days, right?
Yes.
What if you could have done it in start to start manner? How much time will it take?
It might be 1 to 2 days.
No, look
I
at start to start. Activity,
I forgot the days
predecessor is
again.
3 days, successor
3
is
days.
5 days. Even if they are
Okay.
starting on the same date, they will
5
take
days.
5
5
days.
days.
They will take 5 days.
5
And what
days.
about
Okay.
the finish to finish?
It'll take 5 days.
5 days. But I'll show you an interesting point here, that finish to finish is still better. Why? Let me draw it for you, and I will show it. Right? For example, this is the date we are talking about. This is date first, say, let me call it X date. Right? If we are doing it finish to start, if we are doing it finish to start, it would look something like 3 days. And the other activity is after this, it takes 5 days. Right? So it has taken how much time? It has taken
8 days.
total of
8
8
days.
days. So if we started on day 0, so we would finish on day 8.
Yeah.
Okay, if you were using this C and start to start, then it would be
5 days. It'll be blue line for 3 days, and then at the bottom it would be pink line 5 days.
yes. So the blue line, just a moment. I'm blue line would be like this, and the red one would be like this. So this ends on 3, but this ends on 5. So collectively they finish on 5, right?
Yeah.
Now look at the finish to finish, and you will be amazed to see the results. The predecessor is still happening like this, right?
Yeah.
But the successor is connected here. It is to finish here, and its 5 days go backwards. So practically speaking, we will be done on day 3. Isn't it? That means the successor activity might have started before.
But it can't start before.
Why not?
Because
It can.
Where is the limitation? In start to start, it says E activity can finish when D activity has finished. There is no limitation on the start of E activity.
I know, but in the cleaning floor example, if you want to have a finish to finish, you have to use a different technology.
Okay.
And you can't start before you even clean the floor.
Okay. When you adopted the scheme of having a zebra crossing, printed zebra crossing on the road, a already printed zebra crossing sticker on the road. It could have been, you could have started preparing those stickers much before the road was cleaned. As soon as the road was cleaned, you put them on. It is finished to finish.
That's true.
Like I do have a example from the construction point of view. When we construct the bridge, their beams are poured before when the piling work starts. So we'll place them at the same time. We can start the activity B when we start the piling work, activity A.
What's a piling work?
But that's why I was not using these terms.
Yes. But
Piling
I can relate to the
make
construction.
the foundation stronger. They are like
Yes.
kind of pillars going into the ground, deep inside, to hold on to the ground. Like they're like big nails into the ground.
Okay. Okay, fine. In that examples, you can.
Yes.
Maybe the wrong examples.
This is all right. This is very, very good example we invented right now, like you said. So we found an alternative way of printing, of painting beforehand and putting that paint on. So that is our solution for start to finish, finish to finish. And start to start, we had another solution that we have got a dry blowing. Yeah.
For start to start, it's the dry blowing, right?
Yeah.
Right. But you can't do the dry blowing in finish to finish.
You can do that detailed cleaning in 3 days, like the previously. You can do dry blowing. You can do cleaning by water or something.
In S to S you can, but then you want to do F to F. You want to finish at the same time. Then you can't use the dry blowing. You need to use the zebra sticker.
I'll talk about the lags later. I talk about the lags later, but that is another topic. Okay. But drying time, I said, don't consider it right here. For this example, let us not talk about drying time. We'll talk about drying time later in another thing. Okay. So far, you do understand that same relationship can be converted into other relationships. As far as start to start and finish to finish are concerned, a little tricky, but they are doable. But as far as the start to finish relationship is concerned, that is one relationship which is damn confusing. Although logically it is just like other two relationships, start to start and finish to finish, that activity D should have started as if the activity F have finished. Let me draw it for you and it will be more clear to you because that way you can see what is happening. Okay, so the blue one. Blue one would be something. No, sorry. Blue one would be, right, it was right. Blue one is right like that. And the red one would have to finish at the time of its start. So this goes even backwards. You understand this point?
Hmm. Hmm.
So although we are still finishing on 3, but we do not have a clash of 2 activities happening together. So this is even cooler because we are starting a couple of days, 2 days even earlier than the finish to finish relationship.
And activity D is still the driver.
Yeah, predecessor is, the blue one, and successor is the red one.
What would be the example of this?
Okay, that is tricky. You have to think, you could have to brainstorm at the next level and try to find how can we do it. House is open to you. Same example, washing the
Yes.
floor and painting the floor. How can you
So which one is painting the floor and washing the floor?
The blue one
blue
is
is
the
the
washer.
washing the floor and the red one is the painting the floor. How can you do that?
Interesting.
It is difficult, I'm telling you, but there is a way. You can do it, but you have to turn
Yes.
your mind 360 degrees all the way. It is
You
difficult.
almost have to paint first and then clean the floor.
No, that would become the relationship is reversed. You are making the painting the predecessor and the washing the successor. No, that is not true. Washing still remains the predecessor
Now
and
is the time
painting
not to
still
change.
remains the successor. But the painting can only finish if the washing has started. There has to be some technology you have to invent for it. You have to come up with a very unique idea, but you can do it. I am just saying that. While you think about it, let me give you another example which is more easy for you to understand, because I understand that people uh, try to start to finish relationship, they try to reverse the roles of the predecessor and successor, which is not true. Right? The cleaning still is the predecessor and painting still is the successor, although painting might be happening earlier. Right? Okay. My example is there is a guard on duty from 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. That is guard B. And there is another guard who is going to take over from him from 6 a.m. onwards. Let us call that a guard A. Why I am calling him guard A is because guard A is the predecessor, whereas the guard who is already working, guard B, is a successor. Why? Because guard B is not allowed to leave his post until guard A has arrived and taken over. Think over it. If guard A does not arrive in time, he comes at 7 a.m., the guard B has to remain on job until 7. So his leaving the job is dependent on the guard A coming and joining the job. Do you understand the start to finish in it?
Yeah.
So just for your understanding, I know it is difficult to understand, and especially your example, you have to really invent a new technology to do that, but that can be done. That can be done. You can have drying and this painting thing happening in a start to finish relationship. But having said that, let me tell you one more thing for your
I almost have an example.
Okay, come up with. You can
I
say
almost have an example. Tahir is like, oh my God, I hate this cleaning example. Tahir, this is not a normal cleaning. This is a concrete cleaning. It's really
yeah,
hard to do.
of
This
course,
con
of course.
this concrete cleaning is a pain.
Right,
So
right,
you could have a new painting technology, right?
right,
That cannot stick on until you clean it.
right.
Right? So until water touches the paint. So
Yes,
then the cleaning is still your driver because it needs to happen before the job can finish.
exactly,
You know
exactly.
what I mean? I almost have an example of this real life, but I can't quite think about it, where you actually need to wash it to complete the job.
You actually, I have woken up your brainstorming thing. Right. Anyways, I think we are done with it. But one important thing I want to tell you, generally you don't get into the start to start and finish to finish relationships until and unless they are really required to be, until you have to innovate, right?
Mhm.
Until you have to find some alternate solutions. Only then you resort to start and finish to finish. Otherwise, most of the work in a project is done in a finish to start manner. I would say more than 95% activities are linked through 50 finish to start relationship. So generally people don't have any problem. What they do is they do everything in finish to start. That I don't mind. But whenever you have problems, you are stuck, you have to change the relationship. And now you understand how that can be changed. So this is the 4 to 5% chances that you are going to deal with these relationships. As far as, and if you do use, then you are intelligent and PMI gives you an extra point for that. There is an assessment, the scheduling assessment, which is not given in PMBOK. It is given in the, standard for scheduling, project scheduling. They say there is an assessment method where if you are using start to start, you get extra point of assessment. Use finish to finish, you will get an extra point. But they discourage the use of start to finish, and they don't give you any point for that because you may understand it, but nobody else will be able to understand it. Your people, your workers who are actually doing it, they will remain confused and therefore they won't be able to do it. Therefore, let us avoid the start to finish relationship until you have such a team who is exactly of your brain power, who understands exactly what you meant, right? So generally speaking, I would avoid the start to finish relationship. I would mostly use the finish to start in my project. And sometimes when I'm in emergency, I will upgrade myself to start or to finish to finish.
Basically, the first two are very familiar in
Yes.
our construction industry.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to avoid delays and to like for avoiding delays, we have to start to work at a similar time.
Yeah, exactly.
There is a
But you see,
difference between.
one thing I must correct, Tahir, starting two
Sorry, sir.
things
Yeah.
simultaneously does not make them start to start.
Yes.
Because they
There is
both
a
might have been successors of an
yes.
other predecessor, right?
Exactly.
So let's not
There's a
confuse it
time
with that.
between. Yes, there's a time between them, like 1 to 2 days.
Yeah. Okay. Once you have understood that, let me, though it is almost the time to finish, but I will like to complete this discussion by this, what you were calling about the time to dry. That is called lag time. That is additional time required where no effort is required. It is going to dry all by itself. You actually don't have to put some resources to dry it. So that is called lag time. That you say there are 48 hours of lag time required. So that means the activity after the predecessor activity, you have to give a lag of 2 days as if activity E can be started. So the relationship could be written as Fs plus 2. The relationship between A and E is A should have finished and 2 days must have passed as if the activity E can start. This is called finish to start plus 2. So you have mandated that after 2 days of the finish of activity A, can the activity E start? It could be used in SS plus 1, SS plus 2, or FF plus 1 plus 2. Even in SF, start to finish, you could have this plus. But you could even have a minus. That you can say that activity E can start 1 day before the end of activity A. That could be a lead. We can show that as Fs minus 1.
Like we can finish the project before the deadline.
Yes, of course, that could be there, but I'm not talking about the whole project. I'm right now concerned about two activities, predecessor and successor. Naturally, your concern is to compress the schedule. And these are all the techniques you can use. All of these techniques can be used to compress the schedule. You could do SS, SF, FF, or SF, or you can use leads, right?
So, two things then. One is that not everything, if two activities are starting at the same time, it doesn't necessarily have an SS relationship because they may have a driver somewhere else.
Exactly.
Right? That's what we talked about. And the second one was that if the lag is 2 weeks, then you just go FS plus 2.
For example, these are 3 activities.
Yeah.
And they are not connected. I mean, they are connected like this. If they are connected like this and not like this, that means they are starting together after the end of this activity, but they are not start to start.
Yeah.
Here, the predecessor is this one. This is the predecessor.
Yeah.
And these are successors.
Yeah.
Yes, these are 2 successors.
In this case, this is the predecessor and this is the successor. I hope you now get the whole idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I can conclude this discussion for today, and we can move on to the next slide. Okay, yes, I had to discuss it with you. The class we missed yesterday are there's a lot of material left, right? So naturally, I need not even more time, but I have to catch up for the yesterday. So on Fridays I cannot be available. Is
Monday?
it possible? Yes.
How about on Monday?
Yeah, Monday is okay with me. But yeah, Monday is okay. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we are anyways having a class, but I need more days. So will it be possible that we can continue on for a couple of 1 or 2 more classes after that?
Yeah.
After next Thursday, right? Because I want to complete everything in quite a bit of detail as if you get the whole message, right?
Yeah.
Sure, sir.
So that means we are meeting on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday for the next week. And then we decide if there are any further days required, right?
Yeah. It's either we meet next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or we continue the following week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Even if we do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, if we are not complete, right, we may require a little more time.
Yeah. We just continue.
So we will decide on the next Thursday.
Yeah.
You are so kind. Thank you very much. I'm taking a lot of your time, but at the same time, you see, if you are interested, you are gaining something, I'm happy about it.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much and take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.